through that proactive work, this is where spiritual practice comes in. This is why we have a prayer system, a meditation system. We have, ways of conditioning ourselves towards that level. When one starts developing that, one becomes as if one is him or herself a temple. It's like the building of a temple, making myself into a temple. And then all my physical needs and acts, like eating, like sexuality, like grooming, like bathing, like...
אלוהי, נשמה שנתת בי, תאוה.
And greetings on this Wednesday morning, another day in the ongoing, escalating pandemic, as well as the escalating response. And I want to really focus on both the challenge and your and my capacity to respond to it. Both are escalating. First of all, I hope that everybody in your world is well and safe, and that the adjustment to being home and staying put and avoiding the usual gatherings and social contact with others is going well as can be for you. Obviously, this is counterintuitive. As human beings, we want to be connected, and right now the way to benefit the greater good, the way to be connected in the sense of caring and being thoughtful, mindful about the greater good, is remaining in relative isolation. So we're going to jump into, again, the Slonimer. We're starting the new book, the book of Vayikra, the book of Leviticus. And we're on page Yud Tet in the book. And the Slonimer here is commenting on a verse in Vayikra, and let me just do a little summary, a little reminder that the book of Leviticus tells us of the minute details of the sacrifice rites in the temple. The temple, what's called the tabernacle, or the mobile temple in the desert, has just been constructed, and now Moses is transmitting the instructions about how to sacrifice, how to worship, how to create sacred space. And in those days, the technology was one of giving of one's animals and foods to the temple, and mostly there were a number of different procedures, but most of them had to do with burning either the animal or the cakes or the oil or the offerings, whatever the food offerings were, on an altar, and burning it up. And the idea was to burn it, to turn it into smoke, and the smoke would rise up to the heavens, and with that offering a pleasing scent to the Holy One. That was the practice. The cosmology of those days called for offering a pleasing scent up to the heavens. And you can see how that was intuitive, because smoke had a way of going up. And I can imagine the scientists of those days asked the question, where is the smoke going to? And obviously it would go till it would disappear into the cosmic consciousness, into the divine. And that was the conversation between the human and the human's maker. It was by sending up the smoke, the incense, the pleasing odors. And here there's a somewhat obscure verse in Leviticus that is actually what we'll be familiar with, because it talks about leavened bread, about the about the yeast that that makes bread puff and how that is forbidden for sacrifice. So let's jump right in and see how that is instructive to our lives, our spiritual lives, our mental and emotional lives, hopefully to our physical well-being as well. כל המנחה אשר תקריבו לאדוני, לא תעשה חמץ. With all the gifts that you will be gifting to God, you shall not ever have leaven or yeast in it. כי כל שאור וכל דבש לא תקטירו. You should never be burning, and dvash is honey. You should not burn barley or honey. And here the barley is in the sense of the yeast made out of the barley. So it's not literally barley, but it's the yeast product that comes from it. Do not use that for sacrificing to God. And then the verse continues, Korban rashit takrivu otam la'Adonai. You will, however, sacrifice those, which is the yeast and the honey, as a first offering to God. But onto the altar you should not place them such that they are not mixed into the pleasant scent that is elevated towards the divine. And that's the verse. You see, it's a little obscure because first it says do not use those two items, and it says do use them as a first offering, but do not bring it to the altar so it does not mix with the scent that goes up to God. How come? Well, what does this first no, then yes, but, and then etc. So the Slonimer is going to take us on an interesting journey with those questions. איתה בספרים הקדושים וכן בתורת אבות, מרן הקדוש מקוברין, זכרונו יאיר עלינו. So the Slonimer tells us it is brought in the holy books in several different sources. He especially is focusing on a book by the holy Kovriner Rebbe, the Hasidic Rebbe, that se'ol, the yeast, is a symbol for arrogance. So, shemachmitz et ha'isa u'matpicha, because it makes the loaf, it makes it swell and grow, right? So it's kind of like the ego growing. ודבש מרמז על ענייני תאוות שנפשו של אדם מחמדתן. And honey is a symbol for desires, the things that we crave, our cravings and our desires. וכל שאור וכל דבש לא תקטירו ממנו אישה לאדוני. And from those two things, from the yeast and from the honey, you will not burn a fire for God. כי בית עניינים אלו פוסלים בעבודת Hashem, because these two things they annul, they cancel out divine worship. ולמזבח לא יעלו לריח ניחוח, and therefore they should not be brought up to the altar and not be raised as a pleasing odor. Okay, so the Kovriner Rebbe gives us the reason. And by the way, that's exactly the reason that we also eat matzah. This is one of the interpretations about the meaning of matzah, that matzah is, it's a lean kind of bread without the yeast. So it's kind of like essential existence without the puff of the ego, without the arrogance, without the self-congratulating kind of sense of grandeur that really is the basic makeup of the human personality. We one of the terms we use in English is being a self-made man or self-made woman. And obviously it has, it's empowering. There's a positive to it because one should have a high self-esteem and regards oneself level. One should love oneself and regards oneself in high self-esteem, and remember that, you and I were created in the image of God and there's nothing wrong with us, etc. But the other extreme of that, over high regard and a sense of delusion and arrogance is actually counterproductive. And that's why once a year, we go back to the Matzah, to the essential self. We take all the puff, all the arrogance, which is symbolized by the yeast, is put aside. Ubasfarim HaKadoshim, Ubasefer HaKadosh, Toldot Yaakov Yosef, in another book, another Hasidic source, Toldot Yaakov Yosef, which is written by one of the few chief students of the Holy Baal Shem Tov, Mivael, in that book it is interpreted, Al-Pi Ma'amar Chazal, according with the teaching of the sages, that Leolam Yasok Adam B'Torah Shelo Lishma. A person should always be involving him or herself with Torah, not for its own sake, not for the pure intent of just being, engaging with the holy pursuit of studying Torah. It's okay to study Torah for other reasons, especially reasons of ego, because you want to look smart, or you want to be, you want the honor of being recognized as a great, Torah scholar, or because you want everybody to think that you're really saintly, or whatever the case is. Or maybe you want to study Torah because that's how you make a living. Rabbis do. That's called studying Torah not for its own sake, shelo lishma. And the second part of the verse says, shemitoch shelo lishma ba lishma. As from doing it not for its own sake, eventually one comes to doing it for its own sake. And the ideal, obviously, here is to study Torah, to do anything just for its own sake, its own purity. A lot of artists aspire to just do their art with, as a pure expression of their most inner feelings or most inner essence. And that is doing art for its own sake, just doing art for the sake of doing art, without influences, without needing to please anybody, without needing to be commissioned. Like in art, so in spirituality, so in spiritual pursuit. Imagine studying Torah and teaching Torah and being involved with spiritual development just for the pure essence of it and not for all kinds of materialistic considerations. ומפרש התולדות את הפסוק. So based on this concept that's taken from the Talmud, so remember the Toldot Yaakov, student of the Baal Shem Tov, is going to explain through that lens what does it mean to not use the yeast and the honey in the divine worship, in the sacrifice. He says, "Ki kol se'or v'chol dvash lo taktiu meno lishel Adonai." You're not going to use those as a burnt offering for God. Because one needs to put a firewall, to put a separation between arrogance and desires and spiritual development. We need to have a little bit of a distancing between the essential spiritual study and service and the part in us that is arrogant and craving. אך קורבן ראשית תקריבותם לאדוני. But then it says, but you will use those two items as a first offering to God. So he says, what does that mean? בראשית העבודה, כאשר יהודי רוצה להיכנס לעבודת השם ולהגיע לשמה. He says, that first offering symbolizes, represents the beginning of spiritual development. When a person first wants to pursue spirituality, pursue the study of Torah, often one does it not for its own sake. Often one brings in one's arrogance and craving. I may have a spiritual cravings. I may have a spiritual arrogance in the beginning. אז יתחיל משלא לשמה, ועל ידי זה יגיע לשמה. So then, as the rabbi said, you start with not doing it for its own sake, but that will lead to doing it eventually for its own sake. מכל מקום, אל המזבח לא יעלו לריח ניחוח. But to the altar itself, you're not going to bring those items to produce the ultimate pleasing odor to God. השלא לשמה כשלעצמו אינו עולה לרצון השם, because the divine, the spiritual dimension does not want to integrate my arrogance or my cravings. אינו מקבל שכר על זה. And there is no spiritual reward for mixing in those inclinations. ורק שהוא עניין סגולי להגיע על ידו ללשמה. So he's trying to make the distinction between how a person begins the path towards spiritual development and where the person ends up. You begin with your immediate concerns. You begin with what you have. If your initial drive is your sense of grandeur and need for recognition and your ego needs and your cravings, your need to consume and desire and fulfill sort of lower immediate gratifications. So that's where you begin. So welcome with all of you. Welcome with all of that. But that is not what eventually will work as you go deeper into the process. It's a very beautiful analysis of the actual process of the spiritual path of spiritual development. So the suggestion here is also that one needs to let go of habits. Even if it's hard in the beginning, eventually just even knowing, just accepting that at some point old habits and old ways of being are going to fall by the wayside to make room for something much bigger and much more pleasing, much more valuable, is at least a consideration that one needs to allow. It's a beautiful process. It's a process of what's called disidentification. Often we think that who we are our immediate impulses because they're so present, they're so there. It's like, I love this. I love when people tell me, that's me. I'm all about that. But are you? Now, it feels that way. But on a growth trajectory, on the trajectory of development, there is much more to you. Don't limit yourself to just that. As alive and as strong as it is in you right now. I heard a spiritual teacher say the following. Every year I look back at the previous year and I go, boy, was I stupid a year ago. But I don't think I'm stupid now, because it's hard to imagine where I'll be a year from now. But from a year ahead, I'm very stupid right now. In other words, I'm constantly growing and I'm constantly shedding layers. And what seems like a strong impulse or a strong habit or a strong craving right now may not be so in a year, especially when I recognize that I'm in a constant evolutionary process. So let us continue. And now he's going to jump into the last section of the verse that says, and do not bring those to the altar, and may they not rise as a pleasing odor. עניינו, על פי מה שכתוב במסילת ישרים, and this we can understand this through a teaching in the book Mesilat Yesharim, the Straight Path, by Luzzatto, when they explain the teaching of Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair in the Talmud, that he says, Tahara mevi'ah lekdusha, purity brings to sanctity. Ki tahor v'kadosh hem shtei madrigot. Often we confuse purity and sanctity. We think it's the same thing, and he says, no, it's not. Those are two different levels in one's evolution. Tahor hainu shlilat tu'ah. Purity is the cleansing out of what we would call impurities, of the things that are kind of muck us up. You know, it's kind of like a cleansing or cleaning process. שפורש מכל העניינים הגשמיים ואינו עושה אלא את ההכרח. That kind of purity, according here to the Talmud, to Rabbi Ben Yair, is that when a person removes oneself from his or her material concerns, only to the point where only the basic necessities remain. So in other words, I'm eating just really for what my body needs, but I'm not laying a whole emotional layer on eating. I'm having sex just to the degree that, that I really need, the kind of fulfillment and satisfaction that I really need. But I'm not laying a whole emotional or mental layer upon sexuality. So the purification process is to kind of eliminate the excess and have those nourishments and those engagements with physical needs and physical pleasures just to the degree that is needed, and eliminating excess. And the excess usually comes from those layers of, emotional identification and how that ties in with my delusions of self-grandeur, my arrogance, my attachments to my cravings. I mean, cravings is one of those really tough, tough places where the psychology and the physical kind of get entangled and blow up, puff up, right, like the bread with the yeast. ולכן נקרא טהור, שכל העניינים הגשמיים הם בבחינת נרגן ומפריד אלוף. And a person is considered at that level of pure when they're eliminating the excess cravings, because those cravings are considered mafrid aluf umevi'im et ha'adam lidei tumah b'zuhama, because the cravings are separating one from the potential development that is in her inert. In other words, I could grow into having great, amazing pleasures of that I can't even imagine right now on more refined levels. So I need to purify myself to remove the lower identifications out of the way, to make room for the new pleasures, the greater understanding, the more evolved state that is lying there in dormant in potential. And a person who's able to to withdraw from those identifications, to step aside and practice measure, practice self-containment with regard to material needs, becomes pure in that sense. But that does not make a person holy or sacred. Not yet. That is another level. Because the level of sanctity is a proactive level of holiness. Through that proactive work, this is where spiritual practice comes in. This is why we have a prayer system, a meditation system. We have, ways of conditioning ourselves towards that level. When one starts developing that, one becomes as if one is him or herself a temple. It's like the building of a temple, making myself into a temple. And then all my physical needs and acts, like eating, like sexuality, like grooming, like bathing, become equivalent to the eating of the sacrifices in the temple. It's the eating on a higher level. It's a consuming and a physical engagement on a higher level. But when a person is identified with one's material existence only, one cannot attain that. But always, the beginning is always with effort, with practice, but the attainment is always a gift, always comes through grace. If a person makes the effort to be restricting oneself and disciplining oneself around material needs, the level of holiness is granted as a gift from on high. It is we and the divine meeting midway. I make the effort to come here, and from here on, the divine realm is already embraces and takes me on to the next step of the journey. So here we see that just restricting yeast and honey from the process of sacrifice is a metaphor for the human practice of avoiding, not totally, not completely, but just as much as we can, short of what is needed for our own survival, the qualities, the inclinations to puff ourselves up and crave and identify with material needs. And as we do that, not total avoidance, not in our tradition. Our tradition, there is no celibacy. But as we do that, as we manage, as we practice, as we regulate our consumption of physical pleasure, physical needs, and physical nourishment, space opens for that next level that is considered the pleasing odor to God. And from that place on, we rise, just like the smoke of the sacrifice, up into our next evolutionary state, which is here called the state of sanctity. Maybe these days of social separation, of needing to practice self-regulation, to needing to practice new patterns out of habit, is just a grand opportunity for all of us to make room for something new, a new state of sanctity, of holiness that we haven't maybe seen. Maybe we've been too busy to appreciate the simple holiness of spending time with our children at home, or the simple holiness of caring and connecting with those that are closest to us, the simple holiness of thinking of the greater good of society as a whole, and recognizing the interdependence, how we are all connected. We need to act as a collective in order to bring a greater good for everybody to rise together. All those things are opportunities in the midst of a crisis. I want to wish all of us, first of all, safety, sanity, and wellness. I want to pray for all those who are infected or being symptomatic and needing medical care, that may the cure be speedily, that their life may be preserved, and that the medical care personnel, doctors and nurses and everybody else who's involved with acute care and saving lives, may their needs be abundantly supplied and their safety be guaranteed. Have a good day now. Again, next Wednesday we'll be back with the Slonimer, with more Torah. I hope you'll join us again, and also check out our interactive online for kids. This is new programming that we're now offering here from Hebrew Learning Circles for kids and families who are home alone or home together. Shalom for now.